Aloha and welcome. I'm Sean Lether, and we're excited to be broadcasting live on the Conscious Awakening Network. If you're watching us live on YouTube, please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. I'm honored to welcome our amazing guest tonight. She's one of the most resilient people I know, Debbie Ali. In 2006, on her 31st birthday, Debbie was abducted from her home in Trinidad and Tobago and was held hostage for ransom for 2 weeks. During that time, Debbie was tortured in every conceivable way, including multiple rapes. She even experienced death. A heavenly encounter with the divine and met her grounding source of peace, Jesus Christ. She is here today to share her experiences of unimaginable trauma and miracles, spreading her messages of forgiveness, love, peace, and hope. And will share with us how her experiences have led her to win a Lifetime Achievement Award for her work as an advocate for women's rights and fighting to curb violence against women. You can learn more about Debbie at www.debbieali.com. Debbie, thank you so much for coming.
Good to be here.
Glad you are here. So do you want to share a little bit about who you were before your experience and then what happened and how it changed you?
Oh, so much has happened. Before that particular incident, which was on my birthday, no less, right? It was December 5th, 2006. I was pretty much a regular person. I grew up in the church, involved in the church, that is, so I knew about God and all of that, but just the basics. I was a mom already. I worked as a teacher, married, had my 2 little kids, was always a very conservative, very private type of individual. Still am. Uh, and so my life was connected to God, but not in a truly meaningful way, not the way that it turned out to be after my death experience. Um, but there was one thing I should add, though. At a very young age, without fully understanding why I loved this person called Jesus so much, I just knew that I loved him with all of my heart and like all of my soul. I'm talking as a kid, 8 years old, 9 years old. So, it was the Bible story stage, David and Goliath and Noah and, the basic ones. I just knew that I loved this Jesus and not really understanding why. After the death experience, after having met him and experienced him, because it's not a meeting, it's an experience. Um, then little pieces of the puzzle started falling into place as to why certain things happened in my childhood, why I was treated the way I was treated when I was young, etc., etc. Things started falling into place, making sense. In other words, so yeah, and then you know, out of the blue, I'm in my garage and I'm doing my Christmas cleaning. And I love Christmas, and these 2 men came into my garage. One with a knife, well, not a knife, a blade. Let's just call it a blade, more like a machete. And the other one was holding a gun. And now my garage door was open. I was just about to close it. So we're talking in a matter of maybe 10 seconds max. Okay. My husband took the kids and they left to go get flowers and whatever the little ones wanted. And I was going back inside in a matter of 10 seconds. I do not know where these individuals appeared from. And that was it. Gun was here. So like unless you are a professionally trained individual or you're in the military or something, you will freeze. So not having had any kind of background training in those areas, that's exactly. I froze. And I couldn't even process a thought. I'm like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, this is not happening. This is not happening. And, at that point, they proceeded to, just remove everything, take everything that was of value in the house. Um, and I was just literally praying that it was just a robbery and not an abduction. Because at that time in Trinidad, there was a little bit of a spike in terms of the number of abductions taking place. Um, of course, much later after the fact, after I was released and so on, we were made to understand that we were being tracked by these individuals. They were following our lives. Not that we had much of a routine, but they were gathering information. They were aware of things, unless you're like a relative or within our immediate family circle, you had no way of knowing that kind of information. So clearly we were being tracked. And before I knew what was happening, I was tied up on the floor of my son's bedroom using, just ripped out the electrical cords from the fans and a couple of his, gaming things, and tied my wrists and my ankles. Was blindfolded with my husband's tie, and where just when I thought that they were finished with the robbery, they just grabbed me, rolled me into one of my drapes. Like, so they rolled me like a little, what do you call it? Like a little taco or wrap. And, but I fought as much as I could. I was no match for two solid, well-built men in excess of 6 feet tall. I- I'm barely 5 feet. I'm barely 5 feet. There's very little I could have done. And they threw me. And when I use these words, bear in mind, I mean it in a very literal sense. I was thrown into the back seat of the car. So from the get-go, I was being abused, battered. My head is banging, my back. Um, I started crying. That crying persisted for the following 3.5 to 4 days, like nonstop, like day and night crying. I cried even when there were no tears. If but it is possible. It sounds weird, but it is possible. I cried. Didn't stop. I was beaten in the back seat of that vehicle. I was, for every scream, because I was screaming, trying to scream for help, yanking at the door handle, whatever. Um, I was just, banged up, my head, my back, my tummy. I was just being beaten to be quiet. And being the stubborn individual I am, I didn't. I continued trying. But there was one thing that was always in my mind. It was just one word that was ever present, and that was Jesus. Like I said, I'd always loved him, and I've always been dedicated to doing good and trying to follow in his footsteps as best I could. But to be exposed to something like that, for whatever reason, I was not crying and begging for my husband or my father or my brother. I was crying for him. And it was just Jesus, 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 like nonstop. So the first, they sped off with me. There were no witnesses. And I put that in air quotes because there was no way in that the way the community was structured, there was just no way that you can say that no one saw this car speeding. Had to have been at least 60 to 80 miles per hour around corners. And this is a residential community. But apparently no one saw. And the first stop they made was what I refer to as a hole in the ground. It was like a dumping ground, garbage and old furniture and stuff like that. It was that type of community. It was like a gang riddled community. So the lifestyle was such. And they would dump their stuff into that hole in the ground, which was at least 6 feet in depth. Um, we stopped there and I was dragged out of the car again, very literally, lifted up and thrown into the hole. So being blindfolded, there was no way I could know, okay, I'm going to be thrown, or okay, let's brace this way or whatever. I was just thrown, and I was thoroughly banged up, my head and my back especially. Because, when I landed, I remember hitting things that sounded metallic, things that felt like tree trunks or like the roots of trees and all that kinds. I don't know where I was, but I felt those things and it was very painful. Um, then I was made to sit there for the rest of the day because this occurred around a little after 10 a.m. And they put me to sit there until it was dark, nighttime. And I sat there. The wires were swapped out for like zip ties, handcuffs, that kind of thing. And the the tie around my eyes was tightened. And one of the most humiliating parts for me was just one of, maybe in hindsight, probably was not even humiliation in comparison to what I endured after. I needed to use the washroom. I need to go. And they were like, so for whatever reason, I felt like I could ask. Um, and I asked, and of course I was laughed at and sneered at and like, you know, you can imagine the language that was used and so on, which I will not repeat. Um, and I had no choice. After a while, I had to do this in front of these men, and then they were laughing, and you know, and I felt, up until that point, that was like the worst moment of my life, but there was worse to come. And then I sat there, and it started raining. I sat there all the way into the nighttime in the pouring rain. If I sneezed, or if I coughed, or if I tried to itch anywhere because there were bugs around, any movement, there was a slap, there was a fist to the face or the head or the back or something. Um, and then one of the kidnappers sat next to me and revealed all of the information he was aware of. He went on to tell me, well, hey, you know me. You'd be putting the garbage out, on mornings, and um you'd wave to me, and I'm like, what? He said, yeah, yeah. We worked on a house like 3 houses down, away from your home. And I'd pass there. Apparently he would pass there every morning when I'm putting out the trash. And he'd wave and I'd wave back. And told me about my kids, that, son, daughter, their ages, what school they attended, um, uh, about my husband, his work, the fact that he was out of the country and then came back, returned to Trinidad unexpectedly early. They knew all. He was, well versed in our lives. And I'm in shock. I'm sitting there, I'm like in shock, you know. Because like I said, extremely private people, right? How do you get to know all of this information? But before I could even process more, I'm dragged out of the hole on my back. So my arms were raised, yes, and I was lifted, dragged on my back out of the hole like that. And so my back was, you know, very well scraped and scratched and cut and bruised because I was bumping into God knows what on the way out. Then I was made to stand, and they tried to get me to walk uphill someplace. Now I'm still blindfolded, so I'm like, I don't even know where I'm going, you know. But I walked. I tried to walk. I'm crying. Um, the trauma of everything that had happened until that point, I think, got to me, and I passed out. I just passed out. When I woke up, I was on somebody's shoulder, being taken uphill to this little shack, which is where I would spend the rest of my birthday. Oh, by the way, the same guy who was revealing information to me about how well I knew him, remember that it was my birthday. He said, "Oh, right." And they always referred to me as Mrs. Ali, never Debbie. And he said, "Yeah, today's your birthday." And he was laughing when he said, "We'll get, don't worry, I have a nice birthday present for you." It was a big joke to them. And we got to this little shack place, and I was dropped on a concrete platform. And again, I'm using these words, but I mean them literally. I was just boom. So I had no idea what was waiting for me. And I remember my head just kind of, I could almost hear the crack of my head on the ground. And I went dizzy with it. And I was told that I needed to bathe. And somehow I found my voice, and I was like, "Oh, no, 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 I'm fine. I'm good." Because I knew what that meant, right? And they were like, "No, Mrs. Ali, we need to keep you alive for now. And I have cuts, cuts, bruises, whatnot. We need to get them clean so they don't get infected." And, that's when it occurred to me, okay, I'm in this for the long haul. This is not going to be catch and release or anything like this is going to take some time. And I tried to talk my way out of it. No use. They just started ripping my clothes off, and I fought and I screamed and I cried and I was beaten more and more and more. But I had no choice but to bathe. So this tub of water was shoved. Remember, I couldn't see anything. So this was just shoved up against me, a bar of soap in it, a hard hat in it, to scoop the water. And I remember just curling into a little bowl, as small as I could, to try, I guess, to preserve some of my dignity. Of course, failed attempt, because, I could just feel their eyes just, you know, boring into me. And humiliation, ugh, that's a petty word to describe how I felt at that time. And when I was done, they flung this, I won't even refer to it as a towel, because it just seemed like a very thin, worn out piece of cloth, fabric, that was just flung at me. And I was thrown inside of a room and given somebody else's clothes to wear. And that's when they went off to start negotiating the ransom. So that night of my birthday, my husband got the first ransom call. And of course, I fully well knew, in the midst of my crying and calling the name of Jesus, I knew we did not have money for any ransom. We were a young couple. You start building your lives. Your kids are in school, so you've got all these expenses. We had no savings, right? Where were we supposed to get millions of dollars from? Whatever gave them that idea, I have no clue. But I knew we did not have the money, and I knew there was no way we could get the money. So in the back of my mind, I was like, okay, you are going to die. It's just a matter of when and how. And there's no torture like waiting to die and not knowing how or when. I was handcuffed to a little bed, and when this guy came back, which is one of the abductors, he was very, very angry. I started throwing things around the room and, venting his rage, because my husband told him, well, hey, we do not have money. We don't have that money. We are not rich. And apparently that, he said something that was rude to the abductor. And he was mad that my husband would speak rudely to him for taking his wife and the mother of his children. And the punishment for that, for according to the abductor, the punishment will fall on me because he was rude, which I knew, I knew it was not his fault. It was just they were going to do it anyway, right? And so I received my birthday present, which was the first sexual assault, which for anyone would be beyond traumatic. Let alone me, Debbie, who went to school, went to church, engaged in church-based activities, a few school-based activities, and then back home. Met my first boyfriend, married my first boyfriend. I was not exposed at all to that side of the world. So having this happen to me had always been my worst fear. And this man, he was very, very, very brutal. I won't go into the minute details. It's all in my book, though. I let it out, but it he he was an animal. And I screamed and I cried and I fought like I never knew I had that much physical strength to like fight. But I fought as hard as I could for as long as I could. And again, this guy is big, he's strong, right? And one of my hands is handcuffed. Not that that would have made much of a difference, but I I did all I could, and I was beaten and choked to the point where I was in and out of consciousness during these unspeakable acts. And when he was done, I stopped crying. I just went numb. I was just numb. I was just sitting there like, no, 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 no. This happened to somebody who looked like me. Yeah. Yeah. I was convinced she looked like me, but that's not me. No, 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 no. And I'm going to close my eyes and I'm going to doze off. And then when I wake up, I'm going to be in my bed. My bed. And my babies will be there. And I'm going to smell them around me. And I'm going to be good. And I tried it several times and it never worked. It still didn't quite sink in what was happening. But when he was done, he told me happy birthday and left. And early into the following morning, which would have been December 6th, they put this the black mass over my head. And I was taken to another shack. And that's where I stayed for the following 13 days. Where there was one man who was referred to as the keeper. His job was, he was tasked with keeping me alive, essentially, until the ransom money could be exchanged and all of that. And when I arrived there, I thought the other guy was bad. This man was like a beast. There's no other word that comes to mind but beast. I mean, he dragged me out of the car by my neck. So his arm was around my neck and he dragged me by my neck, lifted me off the ground by my neck. So I was essentially choking. And he whispered to me, "You make a sound, I'll snap your neck." And I never doubted it because this man was like a monster in terms of size. He dragged me in and I was handcuffed and lifted off of the ground. I was suspended from some dog chains around a pulley. And the reason I think it was dog chains is because he had a dog. He had a dog. I heard a dog barking very close to me. And I was suspended from the air by my hands with this thing over my face so I could barely breathe. And of course, at that point, I started crying again, and I was very, very badly roughed up and beaten because they wanted information. How much money does your husband make? What do you do? How much do you have saved? And and I answered the best that I could, but because I did not say, well, hey, we have X millions of dollars waiting there, was not the answer that he wanted. So he kept thinking I was lying, and so I was beaten even more. I passed out, of course. And when I woke up, I can't even count the number of times I passed out. Uh, when I woke up, I was on the ground, and he was kind of, you know, un undoing my handcuffs and trying to slap some water on me to revive me. And I woke up stupefied, and he just took me in to this very small room, unventilated. So during the day, I mean, tropical island, it's, you're stewing in your own sweat, right? There's no open window, nothing, no ventilation. So during the day, I'm stewing there, and then at night, I'm like shivering cold, you know. Um, and I was handcuffed to that bed there, I'm still, oh Jesus, what is going on, Lord? My children, my husband, what is he thinking? I'm thinking of my mom. How is she dealing with this? Because they must know by now. And then my dad, who was very ill at the time, and like, oh my gosh, what if he gets another stroke or whatever? I'm thinking of everybody's, you know how they would be feeling at that point in time. And I'm lying there and I'm crying and I'm shivering because it's early morning. And this guy, the keeper walks in, and he asked me what's wrong. I guess he saw me shivering, and I just all I said was, I'm cold. Just that, 2 words. I'm cold. And his response was, well, he can fix that. Not in such pleasant terms. And that was another sexual assault. And he was a beast. I fought. Oh my gosh, I fought so hard. And there was nothing I could do. There was just nothing I could do. Again, slapped, choked, you know, um, went unconscious several times, regained consciousness several times, and I'm crying and I'm begging. And when he was done, he just left. And I was just thoroughly numb and traumatized by everything. And I was unable to breathe properly. So the little holes that they made for me to, breathe, I just widened the holes a little bit so I could breathe better. And because I was having a lot of trouble breathing, anxiety, I guess, panic, trauma, all of it. And he walked in and he said, I told you don't touch the mask. Why did you touch the mask? And I stupidly tried to explain I couldn't breathe. I swear I didn't try to take it off. I was just opening before I could even finish my explanation or whatever. I was assaulted again. And, I fought again. I fought again. I was just drained and choked again. And this time I just passed out completely. And when I woke up, I was there, bare, and bleeding and stuff. And they cared. He didn't care. And, except for the fact that he needed to clean up. So he was angry about that. Because apparently that was my fault. See? Um, and I remained there in that position with my right hand cuffed to the bed for the next however many days. And I prayed, and I just, I asked God to take care of my children wherever they were. My son was 8 at the time, my daughter was 6. And that's the part that really hurt me the most, the fact that they would have come home and not seen mommy. Uh, I prayed. I prayed. And after I prayed, I got really, really angry with God and with Jesus and with all the powers that be. I got really mad. I lived my life a certain way. I treated people with respect. Where did I go wrong? And I examined everything I could have possibly done to deserve that. I couldn't find anything that would, you know, lead to me deserving that kind of treatment. Me, not me, right? What, not me. And, you know, God never responded. The Lord never responded. When I was done, and when I say I was mad and I was, I was voicing this, I was literally speaking out loud. Because the keeper, he would leave in the morning, early morning, and come back late in the evening. I was left with a little bottle of water and a few, dry crackers, of which, of course, I was afraid to even consume because I don't know what's in it, right? And second, anything he tried to get me to eat, I threw up. In fact, um, I went into shock at least 3 times. I guess the combination of dehydration, um, hunger, trauma, everything. Remember going into shock 3 times, at least 3 times. And so I argued with God for a few days. Oh yeah, I was mad. I was mad as hell. I let him have it. But when I was done though, I was like, okay. And mind you, I don't even know what made me say this. I was like, okay, Lord, you're the only one who's ever been with me all the time. So here's what. If this is what I get for loving you and serving you and doing things the right way and whatever, if this is what I get, no problem. I still will not curse you. I still will not deny you. I would still die for you. And if this is the way you want me to die, okay, whatever. And I literally let it go and gave up. I knew I was going to die anyway. So I just had to just let him know, okay, let God know, okay, all right. I see what you're doing. And if this is what you want, all right. And as soon as I did that, the next morning, this man comes in, the keeper. He is a totally different human being. He comes in, he's gentle, he's kind, he helps clean me up, from the mess he made the day before. He brought me a sandwich and some juice. Okay, you don't like this juice? Okay, do you want this one? And brought me painkillers, for my migraine and every. I was like, what? So the first thing that popped in my head, okay, well, all right, he has to keep me alive. Okay, so that's why he's this way. But it continued. His kindness and his gentleness continued. And I always refer to this as Daniel in the lion's den. He shut the mouth of the lion because I released it. I accepted what was happening to me as destined by God. And that's something that I've seen throughout my life since then. As soon as I let things go, he gives it back. But I had to show that I was willing to do that. And that man changed. Still was, terrified to speak to him and all of that, but he treated me with great kindness. And mind you, I was still zip tied and my feet and, I'm still handcuffed, but he was kinder to me. And this is when God kind of took over. The conversations this man started having with me was not so much about, okay, how much money do you have for the ransom? The conversations took a turn towards politics and religion and all this kind of stuff. And it was as though he had never had a friend to speak to about anything in his life. And it got to the point where I started teaching him about Jesus. So I said, you haven't heard of Jesus? Like, you would think that every human being would have at least heard the name. you know? He said, yeah, I heard about the guy, but I don't know much and whatever. And he was very, very curious. And he was angry at me a lot because I continuously said I love Jesus. And he could not wrap his head around it. If you love this Jesus, why are you here? Why did he let me do to you what I did? Why is he allowing you to suffer? Why would you love somebody like that? And I said, well, Jesus came on the earth to set us on the right path. He came to save. He did not come here to condemn. And he could not understand why this conversation went on, and I taught him whatever I could with whatever energy I had. And at the end of it, the be all and end all of that was he begged for my forgiveness on hands and knees. He begged for my forgiveness, which I did. I really, truly did. He cried. He apologized profusely, and he vowed to be my protector. His words were along the lines of, no one is going to touch you. No one is going to kill you. He promised he will not allow it, that promised me that I would go back to my babies. How does that happen? It wasn't me, and I don't ever take credit for it. Never. It was God through me. It was God's doing, not mine. And then after that, he asked if he could be my friend because he never had a friend. He said, yeah, sure, I have these friends, the gangs, the different gangs that he was involved in. And he said, but nobody ever cared to ask him, how did he feel? How did he grow up? What did he like? What did he want? And here I was, his hostage, and I was doing that, and I was listening to him. And he said he never had a friend. And if he had a friend like me, growing up, he probably would not have turned out the way that he did. And so I said, yes, you can be my friend. And he just, he loosened the zip ties around my feet. He loosened he didn't fully uncuff, but loosened the cuff, the tightness of the cuff. He started bringing home cooked meals, um, fresh coconut water, different things. He would bring stuff in. Not that I could ingest it, by the way. I couldn't. I would just have like a little bit and then either throw up or sometimes keep it down, So essentially, when I was released, I was really like a skeleton. I had wasted away. And he asked if he could have my scapula, which is this brown string, Jesus and Mother Mary on it. Has no financial value, no monetary value. And I said, why do you want that? And he's like, so he could remember me and remember that God is real. And with Jesus, there's always a chance of forgiveness. And he can change his ways. And he refused to take it. He refused to remove it. He insisted that I remove it and put it in his hands, which I did. And he wept again. And that was that. That was all God's doing. But I have to say, though, that I don't know how this happened, but the Lord was able to impart to me how, different techniques to use to reduce my heart rate. Because I was sweating profusely during the day, and I knew I needed to conserve fluids, right? And the Lord taught me how to visualize and reduce my heart rate down to a bare minimum, but still be alive, so I would not sweat, and to the point where I'd actually be cool. I'd feel cool in the midst of all of that heat, and vice versa. When it became cold, it taught me how to do the opposite, how to warm my body through visualization and the different parts of my body that were in tremendous pain, how to use those techniques to ease the pain and the discomfort. But of course, those were all temporary fixes, right? But it helped me to kind of get by, but it's very exhausting. And there was one day he came into the room. He did not go to work that day. He came in, or wherever he went. I'm just saying he did not go to work. I don't know where he went. He came into the room and he says, I'm going to let you go. And I'm like, what? And he removes the handcuffs and I'm sitting there. I'm basically free. I'm just sitting there. Most of the time I was on my side. I'm laying on my right side. But that time he made me sit on the bed and he said, listen, I know you can't see the clock, but try to estimate around 15 or 20 minutes. Then you just run. He said, just get out the door and run in the first place that you see. I had no clue where I was, so I just took his word for it, right? And he left. He just left. He said, I'm going to clear the way, whatever that meant. Okay. I sat there and I told myself, okay, this is a trick. This has to be a trick, right? Somebody's going to be out there to catch me and bring me back or something. Or maybe this is where I die. I'm running and then I get shot or something. And all of these things are going through my brain. And then all of a sudden, as clear as you can hear me right now, I heard God's voice said, Debbie, don't move. And I'm like, I knew it was the Lord. I knew it was God. I was like, why? He said, did I come to this world to condemn people or to save? And I said, Lord, you came to save. And he said, okay, well, if you run, his friends will kill him. Do you want his blood on your hands? I said, like, no, Lord, no. He says, then stay put. Now, the normal, logical thinking person would be, he's the criminal. If he gets killed, so what? But see, I believe God put me in that position to save his soul. Why? I don't know. Maybe he would have gone on to save other souls. I don't know. I have no way of knowing. But I stayed put. I obeyed. I stayed there. He came back after a while and he was so mad. Why didn't you run? I cleared the way, whatever again that is. And, you'd have been free. You would have gone to your babies. And I said, yeah, but they would have killed you. And he's like, and, I deserve to die because he had admitted to me how many people he had murdered. He said, I'm a stone cold murderer. What do you care? I said, because Jesus did not come to condemn you to death. He came to save. And he was so mad. He did not even want to handcuff me. I said, listen, if anybody walks in here and I am not handcuffed, we're going to be dead anyway. You need to cuff me back. And I forced him. I had to practically force him. So he latched it, but it was very, very loose. And I stayed there and I could not for the life of me fathom why. Again, it was all God. It was none of that was me. And I stayed there, but I was so exhausted. I think my soul was exhausted. And 2 days before I was eventually released, yes, a ransom was paid, which was a minute amount compared to what they were asking. Probably one millionth of what they were asking. They accepted that minuscule amount of money and released me. Again, another miracle. Because kidnappers they will hold a hostage. They'll keep a hostage alive, maximum 4 to 5 days. Unless, they receive money, then they'll keep them longer, trying to get more. These people received nothing. And it was going into 2 weeks. So my file had moved from anti-kidnapping to homicide. They were in search of Debbie Ali's body. Nobody was looking for me alive anymore. Okay. But that baffled the police as well, because they couldn't, why did they keep her alive and they got no money? And why accept this little tiny amount of money when, why not kill her? Right. It was again, all God. And 2 days before, I just felt like I was drifting into a sleep. He had gone, he had left for the day, which again was like early morning. And I just felt really, really tired. And I thought I was drifting off. What I didn't realize was I was dying. Because as I drifted off into sleep, the pain and the discomfort, everything started fading until it was just non-existent. And then before I could blink, this was me above me. And I'm trying to, rationalize. And at no point did I stop being me. At no point did I stop thinking the way I normally would, or speaking the way I normally would, or expressing myself the way I normally would, and nothing changed. I was just no longer in this, what I like call a meat suit, which is so inconvenient. It's so uncomfortable compared to when you're not in it. And for the first time in my life, I knew what freedom was. I was me, like in all of my glory, perfect in body, in mind, the best version of myself. Let me put it that way. And I looked and I said, but how could I be there? How could I be? It wasn't, as the young people say, the math isn't mathing. So, I went down and I looked and I said, but that's me. I saw my hand, I saw, I looked at everything in the room. So I said, no, 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 I can't be dead. So I checked my chest. There's no heartbeat, there's no pulse. I put my finger at my, by my nostrils. There's no air coming out. And then I'm like, oh shit, I'm dead. I'm like, I'm dead. But it was not like oh, I'm anxious or terrified or anything like that. It was just like a statement, like, oh shit, I'm dead, like that. And, before I could even process anything further, there's this glorious white light that just, appeared from my side. It, I looked directly into that light without a squint, without flinching, no fear, nothing. It was just beauty, and the light was alive. The light itself was alive. And out of that light stepped my Lord Jesus. And there was no like, oh, I wonder who this is. There was just instant recognition. He did not need to announce himself or like nothing. I knew it was him. And, there are no words invented yet to describe that feeling of being in his presence. Man, I just dropped to his feet in awe and love and just reveling in his presence. Because I knew I was totally, utterly, and completely safe. And as I describe in my book, it was like I was looking at his feet, and he was bare feet. Because at first I thought, there's this little glow, and oh, he's wearing shoes, like this excitement, and I look and I see, no, it's actually his feet. He was bare feet like me, because I was abducted. I was bare feet, and I remained bare feet for 2 weeks. And so was my Lord. And I just there was such delight in knowing that he was bare feet too. It kind of sounds stupid now, but it was. And I looked at his toe, and I really, really wanted to touch the toe, but I'm like, oh, that's Jesus's toe. I can't touch his toe, and I'm like there kind of in between, and in between deciding what I should do. And he just lifted me up. He lifted me up to standing position, and I dared not look at his face. I was like, I was so humbled and so honored. And I always tell people, I would gladly die right this second and go back to just his big toe. Man, not even the big toe, the little one. I would go back and stay right there for all of eternity. Forget the crowns and the mansions and the streets of gold and everything else that people talk about. I will take his little toe and I would stay right there just so I could feel his love. And that comfort and that peace and that bliss that just defies reason or logic. But he cradled me. As an adult, he cradled me just like a baby. I fit in his arms. So my understanding of that was his love is so big his heart is so big that regardless of who you are and where you come from, he can hold you and comfort you, regardless of. And he held me. He said, "It's okay. It's okay now. You can rest. It's over." And that kind of confirmed to me, well, okay, I'm dead. But there was no, oh no, I'm dead. What's gonna, there was none of that. There was it's impossible to feel fear, anxiety, regret, anything of the sort. It's an impossibility to feel those emotions in his presence. You just can't. Because later on I tried and I could not. And I snuggled. I snuggled on him like he was my mom. I just snuggled and I slept what I call the sweetest sleep. And when I awoke, I was on the beach in heaven. I knew it was heaven. There was just a knowing of certain things. And then communication was all telepathic, like when he said to me, "It's over, rest, you can rest now." That was all telepathic. There was no speaking. And I always say it's not that speech was not allowed. There was no need for it. There was just no need for it. And I woke up just like a little baby, just like a little baby. And I was over his shoulder like this, almost like he was burping me, like that position. And I looked over his shoulder, which would be back, he's walking this way and I'm looking behind him. And here is this glorious beach. Now, I grew up on a tropical island, so I know the beach. I know what's beautiful about a beach and, all of it. But that beach? Mm-mm. What we perceive as beauty on this earth, it's like, I don't know if you've ever heard the phrase chalk and cheese. It's like, it's a shadow. It's barely even a shadow of what really exists and what is real. And I looked back and I saw the sand just glistening, behind, and there were trees and the water. Oh, don't even get me started on the water. I'd always loved water, but I'm terrified of it, which is odd. But the water, but I noticed there were no footsteps. There were no footprints on that sand. In my mind, I'm like, hmm. But then Jesus responded. Just as he was putting me down on the beach, he responded, said, "That's because you're not supposed to go back." And that's when I tried to feel sad. Because I thought of my kids and I thought of their little faces, and I thought of my mom but that's exactly what it was. It was a thought. There was no sadness associated with that thought. None. I could not feel it. It was so much for them because then, my feet hit the sand and I'm just all squiggling in the sand. You'd swear I'd never been on a beach before. I'm squiggling my toes and I'm like looking at wet sand is clumpy. So where the water hit the sand should have been clumpy, but it wasn't. I dug my feet in and I picked up the sand, and even though it was wet, it wasn't. Like I could see every single crystal grain of sand. And that's exactly what it was. They were each grain was a crystal. But crystals can be harsh. It's a hard substance, right? This was very easy on my fingers. And that's the thing, my eyesight. I could have seen for ridiculously long distances in great detail. And I'm looking at the sand in my hand and I'm able to discern every single crystal. And every single one was different from the other. And so I did that and I was playing in the sand and I'm looking at the water with some very gentle ripples, blues like you've never seen, blues and greens and shades like you've never ever seen. And I longed for that water. And I could see the aquatic life. I could see all the fish, not just like close by. I'm talking about way, way out into the horizon. I could see all of the fish, the coral reefs, the rocks, the seaweeds, all of it. I could see all of it. I could see the skeletons in the fish, like everything I could have seen. from right where I was standing. And I saw the horizon and I saw, wow, and I'm like a kid in Disneyland, like beyond that, Um, and Jesus is just standing there and he's just enjoying my response to everything, you know. Like as a parent, you take your child to play their first video game or something, and you see the excitement and you're joyous now because they're having fun. It was like that. And I just looked at the rocks. I looked at the trees, greens, like, oh my goodness. I mean, when I was released, I tried finding those colors. I tried actually mixing things to try to duplicate it. It can't be found. It doesn't exist here. And then I looked around and I looked up and I suddenly occurred to me, well, wait, there's no sun and there's no clouds, there's no sky. So I didn't ask Jesus anything, but he knew what I was thinking, and he said, well, there's no need for the sky. We don't need the clouds. We don't need the sun. The sky does not exist because there is no limit to where you can move and where you can go. You can move and go as far off as you want and then come right back. Why do we need the clouds? We don't need rain. The love of God and the light of God gives life to everything that you see. And why do we need the sun? God is light. I am light. God's light sustains everything and encompasses everything. So we don't need the sun. And that's when I decided to look around and I realized there were no shadows. There were no shadows below the leaves of the plant, under the plant, around the rocks. There were just no shadows. Jesus had no shadow. I had no shadow. There was no shadow because we were so completely surrounded and enveloped in the light of God. And that just, that threw me, man. And then we walked some more and I realized that as Jesus walked, let's say he took 3 steps, the water would stand still where he passed, which is scientifically, logically speaking, is impossible because there's life in the water. So there's movement, right? As straight as the line was on the horizon, the water stopped dead straight where he walked. The fish stopped moving where he walked. And we all know fish need to move in order to live. They stopped moving where he walked. And as we continued, then the gentle ripples would continue. And I wondered at that, and Jesus' response was, everything must stand still in my presence. And there was a fleeting thought of my children. I was thinking, oh, wow, they would love it. They would love it here. And he knew what I was thinking. And he says, you want to go back to your to your kids? And I said, yes, Lord, I do. But I didn't say it with sadness. I didn't say it with like, oh God, see, let me go back. No, stupid me. I should have just stayed there. Anyway, it's another story. But I just said yes, kind of matter-of-factly. And he said, why? Do you not trust me to take care of them? Do you not think that I would love them more than you do? And I actually thought for a second. And I realized there was nobody else that I would entrust my babies to but him. And I let them go. I let my kids go. I was fully prepared to stay there. And again, as soon as I let them go, God gave them back to me. And again, I should have stayed. Anyway, we walked a little more to the end of the beach, and there was this more brilliant white light in front of me. Again, I could look at it, just like casually like that. And out of that light came a voice. That was the voice of God. And God said to me, if I send you back to your children, This is what you must do to me. And there's this list that rolls down, right? And, at the first thing on the list was this book, Bare Feet. The title was there, the colors, the image, the pages, the number of pages, the font style, everything was just there in front of me. That's what you must do for me first. Recount everything and share it with the world. And then came the other things, the counseling and the helping others and the group sessions and the this and that and everything else. And I said, yes, Lord. Yes, I will do it. Again, I should have stayed. But yeah, I agreed. And the Lord said, do not worry about how you'll find the words. Do not worry about how it'll get published or any of those things. I will take care of it. You do my work. And I agreed. And God's voice, people often ask, was a combination. I wondered at his voice because it was a beautiful thing. It was an entity unto itself. And I described it as a combination of a trickling stream, a raging hurricane, and almost like a soft touch from a feather, all combined into one. And, I asked the question when his voice is so, oh my gosh, beautiful. And he said, my voice is beautiful to those who belong to me. But for those who do not belong to me, it's the worst sound they will ever hear. But in any event, Jesus turned me around and we started going back. But he was so happy. Jesus picked me up and he swung me around like a little kid. And that's when I saw his face. I was able to see his face and hug him, and he blessed me, placed his hand on my head. There's this intense heat that runs through my entire body, but not so intense where it was uncomfortable. And I knew he was cleansing me of all STDs and HIV and God knows whatever else I had contracted from these people. I knew he was cleansing me, and he said, okay, so you're going back home. It's not going to be easy, but you will be okay. And we walked back. And I tried, as we walked back from the direction we came, I tried to look back and I couldn't. I just couldn't. We walked back, and that's where I met the saints: Abraham, Moses, Jacob, Isaiah, Mother Mary. And their heads were all bowed in prayer. They were praying for me. And only Mother Mary's lifted her head and she spoke to me and she said, her message to the world is, God always answers the prayer of a mother. And instantly I knew it was not just my prayer that God responded to, it was my mother's prayer. My mother prayed for 14 days. Every evening at 6 p.m., she prayed for me along with my father. She lit a white candle and prayed for me. And every evening around a certain time, which I was not aware of, I would feel a warmth come over my body, and I never understood it. Then, after I came back to my body, I realized what it was: my mother's prayer. And people don't understand the power of a mother's prayer in general. So, she said that. And then God's message to the world, and it's in my book, Bare Feet, is, I see all, I hear all, I know all that happens in the darkness and the light, and I save. That's his message to the world. And I'm supposed to be a living example of the fact that he saves. And then before I knew it, I just heard boom on my left and the similar sound on my right. I swear it was like a mountain had just landed on my left side, like this close to my shoulder. And that was Archangel Michael. And the Lord said, call on him whenever you need him. He will protect you till the end of your days. And I heard, I could hear the slick sound of his sword coming out and then going back in. He was metallic. He was seriously badass. Like, I don't know how else to describe him, right? And then on the right side was Gabriel. He said, call on Gabriel whenever you feel you need wisdom, guidance, understanding. He will respond. And they're meant to stay with me the rest of my life. And I have so many incidents I could share with you about where I've seen, experienced, heard. You would not believe. They're there. they're here. And I just got really, really tired, and I curled up in a fetal position and I journeyed back to my body. But the journey back, oh my gosh, that was who I am. I was like dancing and flying at the same time, but I had never felt more grounded. I could move at the speed of thought. Like if I wanted to go to that planet or wherever, as fast as I could think it, I would be there. And I moved. I flew in between different realms of time and space, and the spaces between the spaces. And this is the best way that I can describe it. Like I flew that quickly to other realms I didn't even know. Right. And I just, it was like awesome. That's freedom. That is freedom. And that's where I want to return. And then before I knew it, whoop, I'm back in this thing. And I have all of this pain back. And I took my first gasp and I was like, okay, Debbie, you made a choice. But I knew that I would be okay. I knew that I would be released. I had no doubt in my mind. And 2 days later, so said, so done. And I was released, and the keeper helped me with that as well. He said, listen, I'm going to make sure and drop you in a place that's pretty safe. It will be very close to a hospital. He sneaked my own phone that they stole. He sneaked the phone out and gave it to me in my hand. He said, hide that. As soon as we drop you off, just rip that mask off and call your husband. He didn't. Kidnappers don't do that, right? They don't do that. And he kept his word. He did it. And I was picked up by the police, bag tagged, and returned to this hell. This experience we call life. So yeah. Questions?
Wow. You really are. Like, I'm just amazed at your strength and your resilience and, and your ability to surrender.
It comes and goes, trust me. It comes and goes, the resilience.
Yeah, so one thing I don't think you mentioned, but your family was agnostic, right? When you grew up? No?
Well,
But they weren't Christian, were they?
No. They were just kind of floating around when I was a kid.
Yeah.
And it was a neighbor that actually started taking me to Sunday school. And after about a year of that, I insisted that my parents go. And then, my whole family ended up going and being baptized and all of that. So I kind of took them to church, but yeah.
So how was so that early relationship with Jesus you learned about in the church, how was your experience different or the same as what you had learned growing up?
It's comparable to this. It's like you're reading the Three Little Pigs, the story, and then you're part of a full-blown movie called The Three Little Pigs. So you know the content, you know the context, you understand the nitty-gritty of the story, but you don't experience it until you're inside of it, and that's, I knew what I knew, but it was all here. It was not experience. See? So in a way it was similar, but no comparison at the same time.
And could you talk a little bit about, so it seems like when we surrender,
Yeah,
is actually when the miracles occur.
that's correct.
Maybe talk a little more about that, because that is so important. And
Oh,
that's
yeah.
probably one of the biggest things with the near-death experience is that act of surrendering is Yeah. So talk about that a
You
little
see,
bit.
when we surrender, we give up our sense of control or that illusion of control. When we surrender, we give up our ego. Our ego says, hey, we have control over this situation, and therefore I can influence it a certain way or whatever to suit my needs. But when we surrender, we give up all control. We just say, hey, this is all you. I'm not going to touch anything. I'm not going to say anything. You do you. That's surrender. And it's very hard to do. It's very, very hard to do. And very often we need to hit like rock bottom. Like we need to hit ground zero before we're able to release something or let go of an idea or but it might be an individual, might be a situation. Right now I'm in a situation and I'm like, I'm still trying to fully let go of it. But something happened 2 days ago and it just clicked. And that's the way God works. Like you try and you try. When he sees that you're trying hard enough to let go or release something, he sends help. And some switch flipped in my head and I've let it go. I don't know what he's going to do. I no clue. But I do know where I stand and I let that go. Just saying. But I know he's in control.
And I'm glad that you brought up the situation because so many people think, oh, near-death experiencers, they like now their lives are perfect. I want a near-death experience and stuff. But explain how that's almost just the beginning of the process.
Oh, that's just the start. If you think life was difficult before, oh, you're a walking target. You're walking with a big, what do you call it? The rings. You're walking with a target on your back for every conceivable evil, wicked force in the universe. Because now now you're one of these few people who have experienced what the presence of God is like. So you're dangerous. You're dangerous, and everything that can possibly go wrong will try to go wrong. And everything that can possibly come at you for you to stumble and fall and bust up your head, and like literally and non-literally, it is going to happen. It's like everybody you thought were friends, you're all alone. And that's one of the most important things I learned. I realized that I'm in this alone. I thought, okay, I have my kids. I thought I had my husband. No, that's dead and done. I'm still legally married, but that went, a long time ago. I thought, okay, I have my kids, and I realized, my kids will never be able to understand this. I am in this alone. I mean, the Lord is there. Yes, my angels are there, but like a human being, no, I'm on my own with this. I got to figure everything out myself. So it's a lonely road. It's a very lonely road, but it's so hard, man. Why does it have to be so hard? Everything is hard. Everything is difficult. People are unnecessarily difficult.
And it seems like that need to surrender never ends, right? We need
No.
to surrender, turn it over.
All the time.
Yeah. So could you talk? I mean, what's really interesting is it seems like that whole experience was meant to bring you to your knees to completely surrender and turn it over. And
Yes.
that's when everything changed.
Yes, correct. And people don't quite get when I say that I had to be in that position. Like, okay, so why such an extreme situation? And my response has always been, um, I lived a certain conservative, private, quiet life before. I had no knowledge of life on the other side, so to speak. So if you're only exposed to good things, you're going to be raised a certain way. You're going to believe certain things, right? And your actions will reflect that. But if you grow up on the bad side of things, the bad side of life, and that's all you're exposed to, how else are you supposed to turn out when there's nobody to teach you that there's a better way? And so I needed to understand that, yes, me, Debbie, I did not deserve all of that, but I needed to understand that there are other people who need to be saved and who need to be taught that there's more to life. I mean, who's to say if I hadn't grown up the way he did, I would have maybe have turned out to be a killer. I don't know. And I'll never know because I didn't grow up that way. So I think God led me to allow this thing to happen to me so that I could learn and understand both sides. Because if you don't understand both sides, the good and the bad, how am I going to be able to help other people? I have to be able to understand it and experience it.
And how do you think he helped you be able to forgive the guy, especially
I
while it was going on?
I have no clue. Like, I'll be honest, like, people seem to think I have all the answers. I don't. He just, the Lord just filled me with so much love. Like, I suddenly understood this poor guy. I mean, I'm a part-time teacher too, and I'm like, if these kids are exposed to bad things all the time, how are they supposed to turn out? There's no guidance, there's no point of reference for this, something good or something light. And I suddenly understood that in a way, I could not blame him. So I'm not condoning it, you know. And I told him, I said, I don't like what you did, but at the same time, I forgive you because you didn't know any better. And
It's
that's
interesting that you
something.
just said that, because remember, that's what Jesus said on the cross.
Yeah,
Forgive them, for they know not what they do,
they just didn't know.
which really just means they didn't know what they're doing.
Literally, literally. It's, people look at have leading a spiritual life, or I don't like religion. I don't believe in religion. I believe in being led by Christ. Um, but really, it's not difficult. Being led the right way and building that relationship with God is not a difficult thing. It just takes effort. And people, by their very nature, tend to be too lazy to make that effort. See? But it's really not that hard.
Well, except it's also that we think we're in control. So,
That's right.
and until we are in a situation where we realize we have no control and we're
I
forced to surrender.
I will be honest, we are not in control of anything. If you think if you're even in control of what you're doing and listening to right now, you're in control of nothing, right? It's just the way it is. It's how he manipulates the pieces of the puzzle to get you where you need to be. And once you get to the understanding that everybody has a different path, and if that path is good, bad, ugly, and indifferent, that's not your business. Your concern is your path. I'm not saying ignore people and don't help. That's what we're here for. People of the light, people who belong to God, we are here to bring the light. But you don't travel down their path with them. You try to help. If they refuse to listen, good riddance. You deal with that. I'm dealing with this. See, we're only responsible for ourselves ultimately. And when you understand that, that's when you can release people, and toxic issues and trauma and things like that.
That's beautiful. So, just a few more questions about that, and then I want to talk to how this has led you to what you're currently doing now and helping other people with trauma and women. But what I want to ask, so do you still communicate with the angels?
Oh yeah, I do. I do. Because I've been under constant spiritual attack. I mean, when I say spiritual attack, people say it and it's very abstractly interpreted. When I mean spiritual attack, I mean literal spiritual and demonic attacks. I have been under that. Even before, even as a child, I've been enduring that. But it just amped up like 2.0, 5.0 after the death experience. And so there are these entities that are always coming at me or lurking around and all of that. And so very often I call on Michael. Now I don't pray to Michael, but I look at him as my friend. That's my buddy. So I'm like, I just say very casually, hey Michael, deal with this, please. Just please deal with this. Or I say a prayer, or I say a rosary, whatever it is. And it must leave. It must leave. There's no option there. So yeah, I do communicate with him. Michael, though, got a special relationship with him. I don't think time allows, but people have seen him around me. You put it that way.
Yeah. And it would be great if we could talk more about that,
Yeah.
that darkness that you're talking about, because it does seem to happen a
Oh, yeah.
lot. And a lot of us, we don't understand what it is or why, or sometimes even believe it, but it does seem to be real. So there is an important question. Well, there's several coming through, but so somebody asked a question, and this is a common belief that some people believe that, and the question is, do you think that if you followed a different religion, it would be Jesus, that it would not be Jesus who appeared?
Oh, okay, I mean, according to your belief system kind of thing.
Right. So, yeah.
I don't know. I really honestly do not know. Ultimately, I think God the Father, he looks at your heart, every human being. He looks at your heart, your intentions, yes, your actions and all of that, but more importantly, what your intentions are behind those actions. And he will judge you, and he will assess you. I don't like the word judge, but he will assess you based on those intentions. A clean and pure heart, eyes that are focused on him. But I can't speak for other religions because I haven't been there. So I won't say that if a Muslim has an NDE, that that individual will see Muhammad or anybody else, or Hindus or Buddhists or what. I can't speak for them. I can speak for me, and that has been my faith, and that is who I saw. And I firmly believe, this is my belief. I don't believe in condemning other people's religion. Everybody should be free to believe whatever they want to believe, even if you don't even believe in religion. If you believe there's no God, that's your choice. It's not my concern. But I believe, and I stress this, I believe that Jesus is the way, the truth, and the light. He has proven it. I have seen it. I have lived it. And therefore, that's what I believe.
That's beautiful. And thanks for sharing that, Ben. And I just want to say to the person who asked that, yes, that's a common belief, what you were asking, but it's actually not true. So, and I will just share, I was born Mormon, but by the time I had my NDE, I didn't know what I believed. In fact, I had very few beliefs. And the first person that I saw was St. Teresa of Avila, a Catholic saint who I knew nothing about, and she's still with me today. And so I think that's a false thing, that it sometimes is true, but I think, oh, that was the other thing. NDEs are highly individualized experiences. It's like whatever we need at the time is what we get, right? I mean, that's kind of what you were saying, that this was your path. And so, yeah, I wanted to answer that. And
let me just add.
yes,
Before my NDE, I knew nothing about the Catholic faith. I didn't know about. I'd heard, okay, there are angels. So you're thinking airy fairy angels around, like, the buzzing little fairies, and that's what I grew up thinking. I didn't know. I knew that Jesus had a mother who went by the name Mary. That's about it, right? So the experience with the saints and Mary and the archangels, that was all new to me. I had no previous knowledge to say, okay, I concocted this thing in my head. It happened that way, and it did. That's why I think it's so real. I had no previous knowledge.
So I want you to talk a little bit about how this led you to what you're currently doing, and helping others that have gone through trauma, and helping support women that have had these experiences, because that's so important, how this directly has led you to help the world with what you're doing.
Yes. Well, first and foremost, I made a contract with God. I made a deal with him, right? I go back to my kids, I do boom, 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 boom. I'm not gonna break that promise, okay? Not that stupid. Might be a little dumb sometimes, but I'm not that stupid. So I'm keeping my word to the God, to the Lord. But I had always, even at a young age, told the Lord, and this was me as a child praying, Lord, use me. Lord, use me. Lord, use me. Anywhere you want to take me, I'll go. Anywhere you lead, I will follow. And I'm saying this as a child going into my 31st birthday. I've been saying that all my life. And I've always known there was something I was supposed to do, but I couldn't put my finger on it. You see? And I grew up loving film. Other than God, oh my God, because everything else was film. You can see from my background, I love films. I love writing. So I've been writing my whole life. I've been writing books, writing screenplays. Movies are my life. Mind you, I haven't made any major headway in that, but it's still the love that I have for it, passionate. And I always thought that was the way it would go, right? But boom, I got married. Boom, I get pregnant. There goes the dream. All these years later, I have this experience and I'm led right back to writing. Except this time, I'm writing for the Lord. I'm speaking for the Lord. I'm speaking out for women because I was just made to, when I started looking at the statistics of the number of women, especially, not that men are unimportant in this, no, by no means, but the kind of trauma that people go through. If it is not dealt with, and this is where the mistake lies. A lot of people believe if you ignore it, it's going to go away. That trauma builds inside of you. And if you do not deal with it, it will kill you, quite literally, physically, or it will send you insane. And trauma needs to be dealt with. But how do you deal with trauma when the psychologists and psychiatrists and the doctors you go to don't get it? They don't understand. They have all the medical, literature and everything. Can they look you in the eyes and say, hey, I get it? No. But when people come to me, when I say I know, I really know. I know. And I can relate to those who were assaulted and abused in every which way. I can look them in the eyes and really say, I know. And with that alone brings a sense of comfort because you know you're not alone. And so I try my best to make myself available to anybody who needs help. Sometimes I get calls all hours of the morning. Somebody wants to slit their throat or whatever, and drugs, and is losing it mentally, and I take the calls because that's what I'm here to do. It's not easy. It's not easy at all. It's very taxing, but I do it.
And you also lead some support groups, right?
Yeah,
For
yeah,
people
yeah.
that have been.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, if you guys go to debbieali.com, tell them a little bit about your support groups that you
Well,
lead.
on my website, you'll find you can do private counseling sessions. I don't really have a group counseling session for trauma because I think it's a very personal thing and not everyone is very might be willing to open up. I do run my family group on a Saturday from 6 to 7 p.m. Of course, we always go over, but that's fine. From 6 to 7 p.m., where we um, have fellowship, we discuss things of God, godly things. Everything is spirit led, everything is Christ led. And trauma does come up because people join the group for that for that.
And that's 6 Eastern, right? Eastern.
That's Eastern time, yeah. Yeah. So I do that every Saturday. You guys are more than welcome to. You can just drop me an email, and when I send out the link, I just send it out in mass. So as far as group sessions, that's what I do. Everything else, it's like one-on-one because everybody's situation is different. That's what I do. I mean, you can get access to my books there. I no longer have copies of my books, but they're on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Goodreads. They're all there. And yeah, that's what I do.
Yeah. And we put the link to your book on Amazon in the chat. And wow, Debbie, I'm just blown away and amazed
Thank you.
at how strong you are and just how much you are really helping the world and what you went through. I know you are. I know. And I just, I just really honored that you came to to speak with our group. And what would be your parting message that you'd like to share with everyone before
Oh my
we go?
goodness. My parting message will be the same as it always is. Even in the darkest of times, and I've been there with the darkest of times where I've had a knife there and someone had to come and just rip it out of my hand. I've been down to the point where I'm in bed all day and I can't get out. I know what this is, right? Um, in the darkest of times, remember this. God, whoever you see God as, he sees all, he hears all, he knows all. That happens in the darkness and the light, and he saves. He does save. The question is, are you open to being saved? The only way you're going to be open to being saved is to let go of your ego. Let go of control. Because you're not in control anyway. So you can either do it the easy way or the hard way. I had it the hard way. So,
Yeah, some of us are slow learners. At
what you
least I am.
I always say I only have one brain cell left. I tell my students all the time. But
Yeah, so I want to tell everybody, you have a lot of great questions and comments. We weren't able to get to all of them, but we'll have the replay up on the YouTube channel in the next, hopefully week or so. And please go on there and ask the questions to Debbie that we didn't answer today, and then she can go and answer them. And yeah, and I just want to thank you again, Debbie. I'm just honored to have you here today, and so excited to see all the amazing things you're already doing, but I know you're going to do a lot more, and you are just a blessing. Yes. So thank you, everybody, for coming. Thank you to Ned and Katie and Loretta for helping us moderate. And please, all of you, come to our sharing group on the third Tuesday. We'd love to, if you haven't come, we'd love to hear your stories and your experiences. And it's not just for near-death experiencers, it's all experiences, and we'd love to have you come. And so again, thank you. Aloha to all of you. Love you. And thanks again, Debbie. You're just amazing. Such a blessing.
No problem. Feel free to email with your questions if you prefer not to go on the chat, and I will respond. Guaranteed.
Yep. Aloha, everyone. Have a great night.